Well, happy Sunday, everybody. Hope your guys' weekend has been pretty good. So I wanted to I wanted to do a little something here. Now, the last 6 years in the Eastern Conference, it has been owned by the state of Florida. The state of Florida has been virtually unstoppable in the Eastern Conference. We had 3 years of Tampa, of the Tampa Bay Lightning, and now 3 years of the Florida Panthers. And I kind of wanted to take a look. Which of these 3-year runs is more impressive? And I'd love to know what you guys think. Which 3-year run has been more impressive? Now we take a look here. I went through here and I looked at all of the series that were played here. Now, we start out, of course, in 2020. We have the Tampa Bay Lightning. They go into the bubble. We have the whole bubble playoff. Boy, did that end up being a financial disaster for the NHL. But we had that. We had the pause and everything. And when they came back in the summertime, basically, they went right into the playoffs. And they did the whole play-in thing and whatever. Now, Tampa, of course, didn't have to worry about being in the play-in. So they end up in the first round. They run into the very familiar foe. They run into the Columbus Blue Jackets, the team that just 1 year prior, when they had won 62 games, swept them. They came into that series, and they had a little something to prove. They smoked Columbus 4-1. So we get into the second round, and they play the Boston Bruins, a team they're very familiar with in the division, and they handled them pretty easily too, 4-1. So then they get to the conference final, and they're playing the New York Islanders. New York Islanders, of course, if it wouldn't have been for the Tampa Bay Lightning, who knows? The New York Islanders might have won 2 in a row. It's entirely possible. But they beat the New York Islanders 4-2 to advance to the Stanley Cup Final. And in the bubble, who's waiting for them in the Stanley Cup Final? They play the Dallas Stars. And the Dallas Stars, who had a good little run themselves, it was looking like it was going to be a pretty good series. I mean, this was the Anton Khudobin run that the Stars were on, and he was looking fantastic until he ran into the Tampa Bay Lightning, and Tampa Bay wins the Stanley Cup in 6 games over the Dallas Stars. So Tampa is the 2020 Stanley Cup champions. They got all of a sudden something in my eye. Go figure. All of a sudden, my eyes start tweaking. So the Lightning win the Stanley Cup in 2020. We go into 2021. Now, 2021, of course, is the really weird year where basically the conferences, they don't have the Eastern and Western conferences. They just have the 4 divisions because of the whole travel restrictions, because of the entire world being stupid for almost 2 years. But we have the travel restrictions, so you can't go to Canada. If you're in America, you can't cross the border into Canada. So Canada has their own division and all that. So you have Eastern Conference teams and Western Conference teams sharing divisions with each other. So we get into the playoffs for that year, and the Lightning, they play the Florida Panthers. They play the Florida Panthers in the first round of the playoffs. Now, this is kind of when Florida was starting. This was kind of when Florida was kind of starting. They were starting to turn into something after over 25 years of being absolute hot garbage. But Florida's, they're starting to turn into something. They make the playoffs here. They run into their in-state rival. They play the Tampa Bay Lightning, and Tampa beats them in 6. Okay, Tampa knocks out the Panthers in 6 games. Okay, fine. So they get to the second round where they play the Carolina Hurricanes, and they make pretty quick work of the Hurricanes, 4-1. Then in the third round, in what would normally be the conference final, but this time in this particular year was just called the semifinals, they run into a familiar foe in the New York Islanders. And I'll tell you, this one was real close. The Islanders almost took them out. They went 7. The series went 7 games. And Tampa held on. They held on. They won the series in 7 and advanced to their second straight Stanley Cup Final, where they run into a normally familiar foe in the Atlantic Division in the Montreal Canadiens. But because of the way the divisions were set up, Montreal ended up being a team that they ended up playing in the Stanley Cup Final. Well, hi, Pebbles. As Pebbles just came rolling in. See if I can grab a hold of her. Here, give me sweet. Oh, hi. You want to be on camera? Hi. Here's Pebbles. She's gotten much bigger over the last few months. She's about 6 pounds now and almost 2 feet long. But yeah, there's Pebbles. Hi. How are you? Oh, yeah. They kind of nickname her. We kind of nickname her Squirmy because she can be a little squirmy. But she definitely doesn't mind being held a lot of times. But say hi, Pebbles. Yeah, say hi to the people. Say hi to the people on the internet. Yeah. So the Lightning go to the Stanley Cup Final. They play the Montreal Canadiens, and the Canadiens, a great run that they went on. I mean, an incredible run. They knocked off Toronto when they were down 3-1. It was insane. And are you wanting down? Or you just want to change positions? But yeah, Montreal went on an amazing run, and I still said I will still say this: 2021 was the year for the Toronto Maple Leafs. That was the best year they had. That was the best opportunity they had to make a run, and they couldn't do it. So Montreal faces Tampa in the Stanley Cup Final, and Tampa knocks them out in 5. So Tampa wins their second straight Stanley Cup. So we go to 2022. We're back to normal now, normal conferences, normal everything. And Tampa, of course, the reigning defending 2-time champions, they start the playoffs. Their first round opponent, they face the Toronto Maple Leafs, and they beat Toronto in 7. So they advance to the what is the divisional semifinal, where they face, again, a familiar foe, their in-state rival, the Florida Panthers. Now, Florida, coming off a President's Trophy that year, they had won the President's Trophy that year. Tampa sweeps them. And they made it look they made it look like nothing. Hi. Yeah. Hi. Yeah, so Tampa makes quick work of Florida, sweeping them 4-0. They go to the conference final, and there awaits the New York Rangers. Now the Rangers, of course, they're a team that's looking to make some noise. They haven't won the Stanley Cup since '94. They haven't been back to the final since 2014. And what? Yeah. Hi. So, yeah, they play the New York Rangers, and they are looking. Are you wanting down? Yeah. Okay. Here we go. Oh. Okay, there we go. Yeah, she'll let you know sometimes when she wants down. But yeah, the Lightning in the conference final, they play the New York Rangers, and the Rangers trying to get back to the final, haven't been there since 2014, and it's a good series. It ended up being a real good series, but Tampa Bay knocked them out in 6. So Tampa Bay goes back to the Stanley Cup Final for the third year in a row, where they run into a team that was just an absolute juggernaut this particular year. And it was the Colorado Avalanche, and they looked, just watching that run that Colorado went on, man, it was like, it didn't seem like anybody was going to be able to beat them that year, and nobody did. Because then in the Stanley Cup Final, the run for the Tampa Bay Lightning stops. Their quest to become the first three-time champion since the New York Islanders in the 80s comes up short, as the Avalanche beat the Tampa Bay Lightning in 6 games. So that basically ends the run of the Tampa Bay Lightning from 2020 to 2022. Now we go into the run we are currently in with the Florida Panthers, starting in 2023. The Florida Panthers in 2023, coming off the President's Trophy. Now, mind you, they won the President's Trophy in 22, where they got swept by Tampa. So we go into 2023. They're not that great. They don't have that great of a record. They barely make it in the playoffs. And when I mean barely, because if the Pittsburgh Penguins, and again, anybody who really wants to put blame on somebody for this run the Panthers are on, blame the Pittsburgh Penguins for not beating the Chicago Blackhawks in that last game. Because if the Penguins beat the Blackhawks, the Penguins are in the playoffs and the Panthers are not. So, think of that. But unbeknownst to the Penguins and the Blackhawks at the time, they were the reason the Florida Panthers are on this run. So the Panthers, we come into the 2023 playoffs. They are the number 2 wild card. They are playing the record-setting 65-win Boston Bruins. Nobody picked them. I didn't pick them. I believe when I did the bracket challenge, I believe I had Boston winning in 5. I think it was in 5, maybe 6. I didn't have it going the distance. I think it was either 5 or 6, but I had Boston winning. Matter of fact, I think I had Boston going. I might have had them going to the final. I might have had them going almost all the way. But Boston, the first few games, Boston, they're looking fantastic. They jump up 3-1. They go up 3-1 in this series, and it's thinking, okay, this is it. Florida's toast. Well, not so much, because then Florida battles back. They battle back. They force a Game 7, and I know I've told the story in videos. I was waiting at the Cardinal in Minneapolis for one of our pool matches to finish up. I'm watching the game, and it's crazy. The Bruins were leading with about a minute to go in the third period when Florida tied it to send it to overtime, and then the Panthers in overtime, they shock the hockey world and knock out the 65-win Boston Bruins and advance to the divisional final. And it was just like, what, like shock, just like, oh my God, what just happened? So we get into the divisional final where they play the Toronto Maple Leafs. Now this is the whole time, of course, Toronto, we want Florida. The chants in Maple Leaf Square of we want Florida. After that series, they didn't want to see Florida. They did not want to see Florida because they get into that series and Florida's now on a roll. Florida takes the Leafs out in 5. Insane. They advance to the conference final. They get to the conference final, and they get a Carolina Hurricane team that is really, pretty good. A pretty good Canes team. And that first game goes to, I think, like 3 overtimes that Florida ends up winning. And Florida looks just and yes, it was a 4-game sweep, but the games were all relatively close. I believe 3 of them went to overtime. 2 or 3 went to overtime. But in the end, Florida sweeps Carolina. They advance to the Stanley Cup Final, where they run into the Vegas Golden Knights, who, again, they just, like Colorado in 2022, Vegas looked unstoppable. And Vegas, unfortunately, put a hardcore stop on that Cinderella story of the Florida Panthers as they destroy Florida in the final in 5 games. So then 2024 comes around. Now, Florida, of course, in the locker room, we'd heard Matthew Tkachuk in interviews as they're all sitting there in the locker room. They're hearing the celebration going on out in the arena. And Matthew Tkachuk famously going and saying, "Boys, we're getting back here next year and we're taking it. We're going to get back to the final next year and we're winning it this time." Right out of the mouth of babes. 2024, Florida, they win they go and they win the division. They win the Atlantic Division on like the last day of the regular season. They win the division, and they start the playoffs against their in-state rival, the Tampa Bay Lightning. Now, the last time they had played Tampa was just 2 years prior, and Tampa swept them. Well, this time around, they play them, and Florida gets even. Florida knocks out Tampa in 5 games. A 5-game series. And Florida just hammered them. Just hammered them and beat them down, and just, yeah, it was ugly. it was ugly. But Florida got even. Florida got even with Tampa, and got even in 5 games. Second round, we get to the divisional final. They play the very familiar Boston Bruins, who the year prior had won 65 games. It took 7 games. They were down 3-1, came all the way back, 1-7. It did not go 7 games this time. They knock out Boston in 6 games. And it's like, okay, so to the conference final they go. And they play the New York Rangers. The Rangers were up 2-1 in that series, but even though they were up 2-1 in that series, they won a couple of games, but Florida dominated the entire. Florida again, they dominated most of the series. They were beating down the Rangers at every turn. They were just beating them down, and eventually they got the better of the Rangers. They knock out the New York Rangers in 6 games to go back to the Stanley Cup Final, where they run into the Edmonton Oilers, and I was so looking forward to that series. I was like, this is going to be fun. And it was looking like it wasn't going to be much of a series. Florida jumps up 3-0 in that series, and it's just like, holy mackerel. Like, where did that come from? It was literally like the tale of technically 3 different series here. You had the first 3 games where Florida dominated, but Florida, they couldn't put it away. They couldn't sweep them. Games 4, 5, and 6, Edmonton, they flipped the script, and Edmonton just destroys them in those 3 games. They drag them back to Alberta for Game 6, where they win again, and we go back to Sunrise for Game 7, and it's like what just happened here? The Panthers were up 3-0, then the Oilers come all the way back, and they're 1 win away from doing what I believe only 5 other teams had done. And no team had done it since 1942, and that is come back from 3-0 down to win the Stanley Cup in the final. Well, Game 7 ended up being one of the more normal games. And Florida, they found their game, and Florida, they found a way to win. They won the game 2-1. They win their first ever Stanley Cup. So there you go. Florida, Stanley Cup champions. We come into this year, 2025. Florida, again, they're just like, you know, they didn't care about winning the division. They didn't care about, you know, as long as they made the playoffs, they didn't care what their seeding was. They didn't care whether they were first in the division, second, third. It didn't matter. Wild card, it didn't matter to them. As long as they made the playoffs, they're like, once we get to the playoffs, then we're cooking with peanut oil. So they finished third in the Atlantic this year. First round, the 2-3 matchup. Again, who do they play? Their in-state rival, the Tampa Bay Lightning. Now, the Lightning, who had beaten them in 2021 and 2022, 4 games to 2 and 4 games to nothing. Well, Tampa or Florida this time, can they do to Tampa what they did the year prior? Yes, they do. They smoked the Tampa Bay Lightning 4 games to 1. So, just like Tampa had beaten them in back-to-back years in 21 and 22, the Panthers return the favor in 24 and 25, and they knock out the Tampa Bay Lightning in round 1. 4 games to 1. So, into the second round, the divisional final they go, where they face the Toronto Maple Leafs. And I do plan on doing a video talking about the delusion of a lot of Maple Leaf fans, and I do mean delusion because it is delusional. But they play Toronto. Toronto takes the first 2 games. Toronto looking good, looking good. Game 3, they're leading, but they can't hold it. Goes to overtime. Brad Marchand scores the winner in overtime to make the series 2 games to 1, and basically the Panthers didn't really look back. They win Game 4. They go back to Toronto, smoke Toronto in Game 5. They can't put Toronto away back in Florida. Toronto, they fight back. They force Game 7 because it's what the Leafs always do. If the Leafs are going to go down, they're going to go down in 7. They don't go down before that. It's always Game 7. But Toronto forces Game 7, where then Florida, they play their game, and they destroy Toronto in Game 7 to go back to the conference final, where they await the Carolina Hurricanes, a team that they had played in the conference final just 2 years prior. And again, they made they made pretty quick work of the Hurricanes. The Hurricanes, they got a win. They got 1 win, so it kind of broke that string of consecutive losses in the conference final. But Florida absolutely ran their show. And back to the Stanley Cup Final for the third year in a row are the Florida Panthers, where again they play a familiar foe. They play the Edmonton Oilers. I was selfishly wanting to see that rematch because I remember how fun this series was, and I thought this series is going to be the same way. Well, not as much, not as much, because Florida from the jump, to me, dominated the entire series. They dominated yes, the series went 6 games, but it could have been a sweep. The way Florida was playing, the 2 wins that Edmonton got, they had to come from behind in both games. They were down multi-goals. They were down 3-1 in Game 1, came back, won in overtime. They were down 3-0 after the first period in Game 4 after getting ran out of the building in Game 3. They were getting run out of the building in Game 4 by the Panthers. And then honestly, I think the Panthers they took their foot off the gas. They took their foot off the gas a little bit, let the Oilers get rolling, Edmonton got a goal, and it just kind of went from there. Edmonton goes into overtime. They win Game 4. They tie the series at 2 apiece, and we're thinking, okay, this could come down. This could come down to the wire. Yeah, no. It's like after Game 4, Florida decided, okay, it's time to stop toying around with these guys. And they just laid a beating. Just the whole, the beatings will continue until morale improves. Yeah, that was a Game 5 and Game 6. Total beatdowns by the Florida Panthers. It wasn't even close. The Panthers win their second straight Stanley Cup, and they are looking like a team that really wants to cement themselves as a potential dynasty here. And especially if they're able to re-sign all the guys that they want, like Bennett, Marchand, and Ekblad, if they're able to find a way to re-sign them, where they're probably gonna have to trade somebody out to open up a little cap space to make the room for those 3 guys. If they got to do it, they got to do it. But I mean, everybody talks about Toronto. Run it back. Why? So you can have the same result and lose in the first or second round. This is where you run it back. The Panthers, this is where you run that back. 3 straight Stanley Cup Finals, 2 straight Stanley Cup championships. This is where you run it back. And I think the Panthers want to run it back. And I don't blame them. Now, where I talk about which 3-year run was the better performance, we look at the records here, the playoff records. Tampa Bay, in 3 playoffs, they played 68 games. They had a record of 46-22. That is a .676 win percentage. Not bad. Not bad at all. Then we look at Florida's 3-year run. Again, 68 games. Only one game worse. 45 wins, 23 losses, a .662 win percentage. So yeah, both of these runs are incredible. Which 3-year run do you guys think was better? Was it Tampa's 3-year run, or is it the current 3-year run the Panthers are on? Both runs to me are impressive. But I'd love to know which 3-year run was better to you guys? You like the Lightning's 3-year run, or you like the Panthers' 3-year run? Let me know in the comments section below. I would love to know that. Hit that like button. It only takes a second. Definitely helps out the channel. And also, if you would please hit that subscribe button, that would be fantastic. It would be awesome. And also share the video with everyone that you know. Let people know out there. If they love watching hockey content, let them know about the channel. And yeah. And also, do you think are you betting against the Panthers next year? I mean, I know it's way too early to figure that out, but would you bet against the Panthers for next year, especially if they re-sign Ekblad, Bennett, and Marchand? I wouldn't. But again, it's way too early for that. But again, which 3-year run do you think was better? Do you like Tampa's 3-year run, or do you like Florida's current run? Let me know in the comments. Again, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, let all your friends know. And yeah, what an amazing run the state of Florida has been on for the last 6 years. Will it continue for 2026? Only time will tell on that. So again, like, comment, subscribe, share. I will see you guys later.